Dust hung thick in the air, turning the afternoon sun into a dull smear across the sky. The Admiral stepped over broken bricks and twisted metal, his boots crunching through what remained of a village square. He had seen war before, more times than he could count, but this ruin carried a silence that unsettled even him. Then he saw her. She stood amid the rubble like a flicker of defiance, guiding a limping elder across the debris. Her clothes were worn, her hands caked in ash, but her eyes held something stronger than fear, purpose. When she noticed the Admiral watching, she walked over with calm composure and offered a hand. "My name is Mira," she said, in perfect English. "I can help translate. I've been doing it since the airstrikes began." She led him through the village, pointing out where families were buried under stone, where the clinic used to be, where the children now huddled in a cellar for school. She greeted everyone they passed with a nod or a smile, whispering comfort to the frightened and firm encouragement to the weak. The Admiral, used to speaking with generals and politicians, found himself silent in her presence. "Where did you learn to be so calm in war?" he finally asked. "I didn't," Mira replied, without looking at him. "I learned how not to fall apart." And with that, she walked ahead, back into the broken streets, like she had every day since the bombs first fell. The sun had barely begun to rise when Mira burst into the makeshift clinic, her arms wrapped tightly around a small, unconscious boy. Blood stained his shirt, and dust clung to his lashes. "He was under the school," she said breathlessly, her voice steady despite the panic in her eyes. "He's still breathing." Doctors rushed to help, but Mira didn't let go until she was sure he was receiving care. Then, without waiting, she opened her worn bag and pulled out her only bottle of water. She pressed it into the nurse's hands. "For him. He needs it more than I do." The Admiral, who had come to inspect medical supplies, stood back and watched in quiet awe. Mira, who had no rank, no armor, and no obligation, had carried the boy for nearly a mile on foot. When a medic tried to tend to a gash on her leg, she waved him off. "Help the next one. I'm fine." A young Marine leaned toward the Admiral. "She's done this every day. Found survivors, treated them, carried them in herself. She doesn't stop." The Admiral watched her move from bed to bed, offering words of comfort, checking pulses, tucking blankets around shivering children. Her face was lined with exhaustion, but her hands never stopped moving. "You save with weapons," Mira had told him the day before. "I save with hands." Now he understood, those hands were doing more to heal this place than any fleet could. Night had fallen quietly, casting long shadows over the camp as the last of the fires dimmed. The Admiral sat on an overturned crate near the edge of the compound, staring out toward the distant, darkened hills. Mira approached silently, holding 2 tin cups of weak tea. She handed him one and sat down beside him, the sounds of distant murmurs and wind the only noise between them. "You should come with us," he said after a long pause. "Back to the States. You've done more than enough here. You deserve peace." Mira sipped her tea, thoughtful. "I appreciate that," she said gently. "But peace doesn't come from leaving. Not for me." He looked at her, his brows furrowing. "Why stay? You're risking your life every day." For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, quietly, she set down her cup. With a breath, she reached for the hem of her shirt and lifted it just above her ribs. The Admiral froze. Jagged scars stretched across her side, deep, uneven, and unmistakably from shrapnel. Some had healed into ridges, others remained pale and raw. He stared, unable to speak. "I was 12 when the first missile hit," she said, her voice low but steady. "They thought I wouldn't survive. Neither did I." She let the fabric fall and looked at him with calm, unwavering eyes. "These scars? They're not just reminders. They're the reason I stay. People think survival is the end of the story. But it's not. It's where mine began." The Admiral said nothing. Something in him shifted. Back aboard his ship, the Admiral sat alone in his cabin, the hum of engines faint beneath the silence. A pen rested in his hand, hovering above the paper for a long moment before he finally began to write. The letter wasn't addressed to command, or to an official, but to his daughter, someone he hadn't written to in months. He paused, then pressed the pen to paper. Her name is Mira. You wouldn't know her, but I hope one day you meet someone like her. He went on to describe the young woman who had faced death, not with weapons, but with open hands and an unbreakable spirit. He told of the boys she carried, the people she comforted, and the strength she revealed beneath her scars. She never raised her voice. She never asked for anything. But in one look, she changed how I see this war, and maybe how I see myself. His hand trembled slightly as he continued. I used to think courage was loud. Explosions. Orders. Medals. But it turns out, real courage is quiet. It's in the people who stay when they could run. The ones who keep giving, even when they've lost so much. He signed the letter simply, Love, Dad. Then he folded it, slid it into an envelope, and set it aside for the next supply ship bound for home. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly across the sky. For the first time in years, the Admiral felt something unfamiliar. Hope. A year had passed, and the village no longer looked like a war zone. Where rubble once lay, new buildings stood, modest but sturdy. Children's laughter echoed through the streets, carried on the wind like music. In the center of it all stood a bright, freshly painted school with a wooden sign over the entrance, the Mira Project, for hope, for home. Inside, Mira stood before a classroom full of wide-eyed children. Her hands moved across a chalkboard, writing out simple English words. A girl raised her hand, and Mira knelt beside her, smiling patiently as she guided her through the letters. Her scarf was tucked around her ribs, the scars hidden but never forgotten. Outside the school, a convoy pulled up. The Admiral, now retired but still wearing his navy cap, stepped out slowly. His face was softer, his eyes brighter. He watched from a distance as Mira led the children in a song. They sang with joy, their voices rising into the sunlit air. A young officer beside him asked, "Is that her?" The Admiral nodded. "Yes. That's Mira. She didn't leave." "No," the Admiral said, his voice quiet with reverence. "She never needed rescue. Turns out, we did." He walked forward and placed a small plaque by the school entrance. It read, "To the one who taught us that healing doesn't come from power, but from love." As he turned to leave, Mira looked up, caught his eye, and smiled. And in that moment, everything felt whole again.